Good day. This is Solidarity News Brief, bringing you news highlighting the dignity of human life from conception to natural death. I'm Valerie Niemeyer with Solidarity News Brief, and we are pleased to have the opportunity today to chat with Lauren Onak about the American Solidarity Party and her perspective as the vice presidential candidate on their POTUS ticket alongside Peter Sonski. Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, can we begin by defining this important term that we and our constituents both find so important as to include in our very name, solidarity? What does the word mean to you, and how does it affect your approach to politics?
I think that solidarity, when you kind of boil it down to what it really means in today's culture, is the idea of taking responsibility for and care for other people's problems. I think we live in a highly individualistic culture where, it was your decision to have those kids, so, that's your issue. And solidarity reframes it and says, my neighbor's problem is my problem because I care for my neighbor, because I care for the common good. And in fact, making things easier for my neighbor will make them easier for everyone else. I was just describing an example to, we have an issue here where I live with affordable housing, and people complain that if we built this housing, the commute would be longer, the schools would be more crowded, and it's sort of an anti-solidarity mindset of this is a bunch of families would have a place to live, which is a greater good than your commute being a little bit longer. So it's that idea of being able to see society's problems through the lens of it's not just all on you to fix it, but we have a collective responsibility for each other.
Sure, kind of moving away from what's in it for me to
Yeah.
recognizing that's actually when other people aren't receiving or aren't experiencing kind of what they need to flourish, that it actually does impact me. But not that I'm just in it for me anyway, right? Like even if supporting them will help me, we want to support others because we care. And that,
Right.
in essence, that reflects our own and serves our own sense of well-being and our own flourishing. So no, I appreciate that. And so as far as how does it more concretely apply to the political endeavor?
So I think that we've been sort of trained in a way in this country to think about things in a very transactional way, in a very, like you said, how does this benefit me? And so for me, growing up and learning about things like Catholic social teaching, um, preferential option for the poor, like what does that mean and what does that look like? Um, I, you know, I could see a lot of gaps in American politics. Obviously, we all do, and that's why we have so many people angry about this upcoming election and kind of the state we find ourselves in general as one of the world's wealthiest countries and with so much disparity. But for me, learning about those ideas was sort of a bedrock for my formation as a kid, as a teenager, as someone entering into, becoming a good citizen. And it affected me because I couldn't, after some time, really logically justify a home in either major political party. So it definitely had an impact because it led me here. It led me to the ASP. And so it definitely shapes my views around, whether something is left or right needs to be secondary to is it in keeping with the dignity of the human person? That needs to be the first standard by which we judge something, not which team is going to win. And I think so. I think that that's in a concrete way how it's affected just the way I view a political argument to begin with.
Sure. No, that's well said. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to be a member of the American Solidarity Party?
Sure. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I have three young kids, and um, like many people, 2020 was a really difficult year, pandemic and sort of social unrest. And the election that year just really felt like probably the most bitter in my lifetime, on top of everything else that we were all going through as a country. And I really got through that thinking, well, I really want to like tell my kids I did something positive to help, that I didn't contribute to just more division, but that I actually tried to, bring people together. I think a big part of this campaign is mobilizing people of goodwill and Christians to run for office. I've just seen in our party so many more people interested in just trying out local government. Um, so that was kind of what led me to ASP. I am really active in my community, and I think ASP is very community local focused. So it's funny because we're all, you talk to the party members, and this is always never the only thing they do, right? We're all plugged in a lot of different ways. So I'm in various groups at my church, helping with the local moms club, um, helping at my kids' school, and so I think, for me, I think community building is one of my sort of talents and goals, and that's sort of what led me here. And that's been really interesting during this election because there have been a group of families at my kids' school who have rallied around me and Peter and have gotten other people interested, and we're building those bridges. But obviously, it's a slow process and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah. Now, as a woman, how do you see the values and policy leanings of the American Solidarity Party being at the service of not only the common good, but at the service of women in particular?
Yeah, so I think there's a big perception, and I'm not saying it's completely unjustified, but there's a big perception about the pro-life movement that you care about babies until they're born, and then that's it. You're not there for the mom afterwards. Like I said, that is true of some segment of that movement, but I think the movement is big enough to encompass groups like the ASP, who both have a both and approach. Okay, we care about the life of the child in the womb, but we also care about the healthcare and housing and well-being and economic safety and security of that mom and dad or whoever else is in that child's life going forward. And so when, I think back, just in terms of being a woman, I think back to my first training of working with women who are vulnerable to abortion in New York City. And we had our first training, we heard all these different sort of testimonies from women who had been vulnerable to abortion. And one woman said very clearly, I don't have a choice. So we call this like a pro-choice movement, but she said, I don't have a choice. She felt like abortion was her only choice. And so I think the idea that you're going to liberate women by making their bodies a site of violence, taking away their child, leaving them with this huge wound that society is going to tell you is okay when it's not, isn't a service to women. It's actually mocking them. It's totally disrespecting who we are and who God made us to be and who we are biologically. And it's almost, it's so, I would say, demeaning to say your choice is this because society can't get it together to support you. And so I think for women, a lot of women come at, the pro-life movement, that issue, from a place of compassion. They think, right? They don't want anyone to be left with something that they can't handle or something that's too much for them, a child that's too much for them. But is that a real choice? I think is the question that we're pushing. And as a party, what we push in terms of what is pro-woman is what is good for her to be able to keep that child, what's good for the whole family. So what kind of economic policies can we support? In what ways can government and local government be providing a better safety net for families? It's a very holistic approach, and that's why it's pro-woman, because we're at the heart of the family, and we need to be supported. Women, mothers, young mothers now are more and more likely to feel lonely, depressed, anxious. There's been a skyrocketing of postpartum depression in our country recently. And a lot of that has to do with a lack of communal supports. And this is what everyone's saying, right? This is the piece that they can't fix, so to speak. That we're really learning the hard way. And women of my generation are learning this, right now. COVID brought it out more, but it was already trending, that it does take a village. It's not a do it on your own. You had those kids, so now you take care of them kind of deal, because that doesn't work out well for the kids or for the mom or for anybody. And so in order to see families thrive, we have to see moms thrive. And that is where I'm seeing, all of our platform material on making, all prenatal health care affordable, making birth affordable, providing more supports at birth, and then on to the family needing health care after the birth. And how do we make sure that everyone has access to the health care they need? How do we make sure that kids aren't hungry at school? And all these different sort of policy connections that we bring into the platform are all designed to underpin the family, and through that to bolster women and hold them up and say, your dignity is central to this whole project.
Very nice. So do you want to say anything more about, kind of my next question was, what does the American Solidarity Party bring to the table with regard to the pro-life movement? I think you've articulated that well already. Is there anything else you would add, kind of, and in particular in this post-Dobbs season, is there anything else you want to say about it as a good option for people who would see themselves as, whole life, womb to tomb pro-life people?
Right. So if people are unfamiliar with that idea of like whole life for the pro-life for the whole life, it's really an idea that that is based in human dignity at all stages. So, in our platform, you'll hear us speak out against euthanasia. You'll hear us speak out against the death penalty. You'll hear us talk about disability rights. And I have a disabled child, and that was another thing that kind of drew me in is, okay, in one, the state we're living in, I was, subtly pressured in certain ways when I was pregnant with her. But that state happened to have great benefits for her after she was born. And then the reverse might be true in a red state. And it was just very frustrating, this sort of, okay, you're solely supporting me with this kid once she's here, but you're not acknowledging that she's, her humanity in the womb. And so, so when we talk about pro-life for the whole life, we really talk about an all-encompassing idea of human dignity at all these different vulnerable points. Who is the vulnerable person in this situation, and how do we sort of guide our policy to address those vulnerabilities is really a way you could read the whole platform. And so what do we have to bring to the table? Well, we know, there's a lot of shifts that have been happening in American politics right now. So we saw the GOP shift away from protections for the unborn in their recent revisions to their platform. We've seen the Democrats grow more extreme on this issue. But we've also seen, there was a Washington Post op-ed a few months ago in the wake of Dobbs saying, what are the bipartisan policy initiatives we can agree on, after Dobbs? So these two columnists disagreed on abortion, but what were the pro-family policies they could agree on? They came up with a very long list. And my question is, why haven't those things been done? Some of them have been done in states and trial runs. Some of them are like in progress. But I think a lot of us feel like the two major parties are more concerned with fighting each other than doing things that are actually going to benefit the common good. Now, not to say there's been nothing helpful. There, of course, there have been helpful things, but there's so much work to be done in the realm of helping family life be more affordable and more just culturally easy. And I do think that not that policy can solve all those problems. A lot of it is communal problems, a lot of it is a heart problem. But I do hope that what we can do as a party as is pressure, these major parties and say, this is what people want. There's a lot of things that people that you guys could agree on and work on that people want. And so the ASP, third parties have a lot of different roles. One of those roles is to pressure the major parties and to say, hey, like, you lose enough votes to us, like, maybe you should start thinking about passing some of this family policy, whatever it may be, whether it's school lunches, whether it's, there, in Florida, they had a sort of trial of like discounts on baby items and different things like that. That is a role that third parties can play. And so sometimes people ask, what do you guys do? Well, a lot of what we aim to do is to use our influence in its limited way to say to these major parties, hey, you're missing a huge swath of people here, not just the pro-life movement or not just, the anti-death penalty, folks, but just basic policy stuff you could be doing that wouldn't really be that hard for you to do. I mean, we saw you step up during the pandemic. We saw really fast responses then. So why are these things taking so long? Why is it taking so long to help families that need help? So that's kind of one of the, big ways that we can, and historically that third parties have held influence over American politics generally. And so I would say to people who who see Dobbs as an opportunity to say, a lot of us in the pro-life movement said, this is the beginning, right? Our work starts now. A lot of us said that. I said that. Our work starts now. But I think then people get lost in like, how do I help? How do I, see this vision through? Well, one way you can see it through is through using your political voice to put pressure on politicians to, sort of bring this pro-life for the whole life approach to the policies that they pass. So I was just thinking back to that, summer day 2 years ago when we were all saying, this is the beginning. We need to follow through with that vision. I think a lot of us felt really excited, and then we get dragged back down into sort of partisan politics and feeling like the machine is rigged and, one way or another, sort of feeling like we don't have any voice in the system. But I have seen, a lot of people roll into action in their local area to sort of, provide resources, provide material help. And then I think it goes back to the question of solidarity, right? It's like these children that are being born in some states where they wouldn't have been born 2 years ago, and I think about this a lot. A lot of people see those numbers and it worries them, it scares them, or it makes them feel bad. And I think we have a chance to look at this and say, like, these are our children too, not in a overbearing way, but like, these are our children because we are responsible. Like, we rejoice that they're here, and we're responsible to try to make their lives better now that they're here, because all of this work, all of this progress, eventually led to this moment of having these people in the world that weren't going to be here, and thank God for that. But these are our children. Like, we need to be constantly advocating for them. So I think that's kind of linking it back to solidarity. That's where we, we kind of step back in and say, we are each other's, we belong to each other. And that means helping the mom in Texas um, who had that baby. You know what I mean? So that's sort of where I see the ASP as having a unique role post-ops. Okay, guys, like we all want this. We all say we want this. So let's use our political influence to try to make it happen.
Mhm. Great. You touched on third party and roles of third parties. And so I'm curious, how do you respond to folks who suggest that investing in or voting for a third party is imprudent or maybe even irresponsible because it's just simply not a viable option in our two-party dominated US system? How do you
Yeah.
respond?
I mean, it's every day we get this question. Now that the election's getting close, we get a lot of questions about that, Facebook comments, just people, and they're not asking in a nasty way, but they just really want to know why should I do this? And there's a lot of different answers you could give. If you don't live in a swing state, your vote really isn't contributing to one person winning anyway, right? So there's a big opportunity in non-swing states for your vote to stand out. Actually, you're kind of going to waste your vote more by voting for one of the major party candidates because the conclusion is already foregone. If you actually want someone to notice your vote, then you could vote third party and that would stand out, right? But even in the swing states, it's like what I said about influence, and there's a few different pieces to this response that you can give someone depending on where they're at, and you have to assess like, okay, what does this person care the most about? What are they worried about? And it's funny to me because this whole year, over a year now, whenever someone says, I would vote for you, but so and so can't win, I can never predict who the so and so is going to be because both sides see it as a completely cataclysmic event if the other person wins. And so it's really hard to like predict, okay, well, whose side are you going to be on? I don't even know because it's just so polarized. But one thing is the thing I said about exerting influence. If you live in a swing state, and you can look at Wisconsin in the 2020 election, they were actually a great example of this. The difference between Biden and Trump total vote numbers, Biden and Trump total vote numbers was the number of people that voted for third parties was actually higher altogether. Now it wasn't just ASP, but we were one factor in that of all the people that voted for third parties. So what do you think, the result of that will be? Well, obviously the Democratic and Republican parties are going to be on the ground in Wisconsin trying to figure out why people voted the way they did, right? So that kind of influence is important. The other piece of it is, and this is a long game, but I feel like Christians are playing the long game, so we understand this. We have to start somewhere. Peter and I might not be the most qualified people for this particular role, but it has to start somewhere because we're planting seeds, and each election cycle we're trying to grow. We're trying to, get more donors, get more funding for ballot access, get better infrastructure, just all these things. And I think a lot of people know and understand we're all volunteers and we all have families and jobs and different things, but we're all putting this into it because we want to establish something that future generations can participate in and be proud of. And, I was talking to someone on the phone today in a state where we're trying to get ballot access and we're having some, setbacks and normal struggles and this sort of stuff happens. But, I was sort of complaining and he said, but the real thing here is you're giving me someone to vote for that I feel like I feel good about. You said you're giving me candidates that I actually respect. So that's the important thing. And it kind of reframed it for me. Okay, it's not the day-to-day struggle. Yeah, there's going to be a ton of kinks in trying to do a project like this for any third party, I think, especially, those of us who are like newer.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, can't lose sight of the bigger picture that we're planting seeds. We're planting seeds and I think one of the most striking things to me after the 2020 election when Brian Carroll, our nominee that year, kind of posted, his withdrawal speech or whatever, whatever, and he was, okay, I didn't win. The number of people who commented, like, you gave me something positive to vote for, someone positive to vote for, something good to support. I was able to vote my conscience because you did this. That was huge. And that was a huge outpouring. And I remember reading those comments and crying on, the day after, because it was so beautiful. And it was so, it is this role that we're playing. So yeah, again, like, that question comes up all the time. There's a lot of different ways you can answer it, but a lot of it has to do with the long game, like I said, and also just influence in the short term. What if every pro-lifer who had voted GOP votes for us because of the changes to the platform? I think they would notice. I think they might have some thoughts about what they did to the platform last week. So is it going to happen? I don't know. It really depends on how angry people are going to get and how fed up they're going to get with being taken for granted, honestly. But that's the kind of thing that could spark a change.
Thank you. So if folks want to learn more about the American Solidarity Party or the Sonski-Onak campaign, where would you direct them?
So petersonsky.com is the official campaign website, and that will have information about which states are on the ballot, in which states we're trying to get on the ballot, in which states we have official write-in status already. There's a volunteer page there that you can fill out a form with your skill set, and we can see if we still do need volunteers in a few crucial states to just help us get on the ballot in those states. So that's super helpful. If you want to read the party's platform, it's solidarity-party.org, and it's right there, principles and platform. It's a beautiful document, and it's coherent, and I think it's going to be refreshing if you haven't read it before.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lauren, and we wish you well with your campaign. Have a good day, everyone, and remember, all human life has dignity from conception to natural death.